14 bodies discovered inside this Chrysler plant tonight. Police say the victims are all corporate executives. A manhunt is now underway.
On the morning of March 8, 1982, a security guard named Walter Brozek arrived for his shift at the Hamtramck Assembly Plant. He was 72 years old. He had worked at that plant for 43 years, and he had never seen anything like what waited for him inside. The doors were chained from the inside. Walter used his master key to enter through the loading dock. The first thing he noticed was the smell. The second thing he noticed was the blood. 14 bodies were scattered across the assembly line floor, all of them wearing suits. Some had fallen near the fire exits. Others lay draped across the machinery itself. The equipment that had built 3 million automobiles was now covered in what remained of the men who had come to shut it down. Walter Brozek called the Wayne County Sheriff at 6:47 a.m. By 8 o'clock, the plant was surrounded by police. By noon, the FBI had arrived. By evening, every news station in America was broadcasting the same headline: the Hamtramck Assembly Line Massacre. 14 executives from Chrysler Corporation, dead. But here is what made this story different. The men responsible were not gang members. They were not hired killers. They were not desperate criminals with nothing to lose. They were Kazimierz Wojciechowski and his 3 sons, third-generation auto workers, union men, veterans, men who had built the cars that rolled off that line for 58 years, men who had followed every rule, punched every clock, paid every tax, men who had just been told that their pensions were worthless, that 31 years of contributions had been reclassified as voluntary severance, that everything they had worked for was gone. 14 executives entered that plant for a final walkthrough. None of them would leave alive. We have changed some names and dates for legal purposes. If you have the courage to hear what happened inside that plant, stay with me. But I warn you, some of you will condemn these men by the end. Others will understand them. And a few of you, the honest ones, will admit you might have done the same thing. To understand what happened inside that plant, you need to understand what Detroit was and what it became. In 1965, the American auto industry was the most powerful manufacturing force on Earth. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler employed over 700,000 workers. A man with a high school diploma could walk into a plant, shake a foreman's hand, and start earning $18 an hour by the end of the week. That was good money. That was a house, 2 cars, a vacation every summer, and a pension waiting at the end. Detroit wasn't just a city. It was a promise. Work hard, follow the rules, and America will take care of you. The Hamtramck Assembly Plant was the heart of that promise. It opened in 1910. By 1965, it employed 4,200 workers, 3 shifts running 24 hours a day. The parking lot stretched for half a mile. The men who worked there didn't just have jobs. They had dynasties. Grandfathers trained sons who trained grandsons. The same families punched the same time clocks for generations. Hamtramck itself was 90% Polish-American. The street signs were in Polish. The church masses were in Polish. And the plant was the only employer that mattered. Then the collapse began. It started slowly. In 1973, the oil embargo hit. Gas prices tripled. Suddenly, Americans didn't want the big V8 sedans that Detroit built. They wanted small, fuel-efficient cars. And Japan was building them. Toyota, Datsun, Honda. By 1980, Japanese imports had captured 27% of the American auto market. 27%. Detroit had no answer. The Big Three had spent decades building land yachts with chrome bumpers and 8-cylinder engines. They couldn't pivot fast enough, and the workers paid the price. Between 1978 and 1982, Michigan lost 250,000 manufacturing jobs, 250,000 people, exposed. The unemployment rate in Detroit hit 16.4%. 1 in 6 workers had no job. And those were the official numbers. The real numbers were worse. Chrysler was hit hardest. By 1980, the company was bleeding $400 million per quarter. They went to Washington with their hands out, and Washington gave them $1.5 billion, the largest corporate bailout in American history at that time. But the money came with conditions. Chrysler had to restructure, they had to cut costs, and the easiest cost to cut was labor. In 1981, Chrysler announced they were closing 14 plants nationwide. Hamtramck Assembly was on the list. By January of 1982, only 340 workers remained. 340, down from 4,200. The parking lot that once stretched half a mile was empty. The men who still had jobs knew they were living on borrowed time. And then the corporate team arrived. January 14, 1982. 3 black sedans pulled into the Hamtramck lot. 14 men stepped out. Suits, briefcases, clipboards. They had flown in from New York. They were there to finalize the closure. The team was led by a man named Lawrence Whitmore. He was 47 years old, vice president of operations for Chrysler's restructuring division. He had never worked a factory floor in his life. He had an MBA from Columbia and a house in Connecticut worth $800,000. His job was simple: shut down plants, liquidate assets, eliminate pension obligations. He was very good at his job. Whitmore gathered the remaining workers in the plant cafeteria. 340 men in oil-stained coveralls sitting on plastic chairs, waiting to hear their fate. Whitmore stood at a podium with a microphone. He spoke for 11 minutes. He used words like market realities and competitive restructuring and workforce transition. He thanked them for their years of service. He told them the plant would close permanently on March 15th. He told them they would receive transition assistance packets in the mail, and then he left. He didn't take questions. The workers sat in silence. Some of them had been at that plant for 30 years. Some of them had followed their fathers and grandfathers onto that floor. Some of them had nothing else. No other skills, no other options, no other future. Kazimierz Wojciechowski was sitting in the third row. He was 51 years old. He had worked at Hamtramck Assembly for 31 years. His father had worked there for 40. His grandfather had started in 1924. 3 generations, 58 years, 1 family, and Lawrence Whitmore had just told him it was over. But the closure wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 2 weeks later, when the transition packets arrived, and Kaz Wojciechowski discovered what Chrysler had really done to him. The transition packet arrived on January 28, 1982. A brown envelope with the Chrysler logo in the corner. Kaz Wojciechowski opened it at his kitchen table. Helena sat across from him. She watched his face as he read. She saw the color drain from his skin. 14 pages of legal language, definitions, clauses, subsections. But on page 11, one paragraph changed everything. All pension contributions made by hourly workers between 1967 and 1982 had been reclassified. Reclassified. That was the word they used. The new classification was voluntary early retirement severance allocation. Kaz read the paragraph 3 times. Then he read the next one. Under the terms of the 1980 restructuring agreement, voluntary early retirement severance allocations were not protected pension benefits. They were subject to corporate discretion, and Chrysler's discretion was to eliminate them. 31 years at that plant, $340 per month, every single paycheck. Documentation showing over $126,000 contributed. Gone. Reclassified out of existence. The next morning, Kaz called the union. Bill Stavros answered. 20 years as a shop steward. He knew Kaz. He knew his father. His voice was heavy on the phone. "I'm sorry, Kaz. The new contract has language that allows it. We fought against it. We lost." A long pause. "There's nothing I can do." Kaz called a lawyer next. The consultation cost $75. The answer cost nothing because it was worthless. A lawsuit would take 3 to 5 years. Legal fees would run around $40,000. And Kaz would probably lose because the contract language was clear. The lawyer wished him luck. That was free. Kaz filed a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board. A woman with a tired voice explained the process. 6 to 8 months for review. A response would come by mail. She thanked him for his patience. Patience, after 31 years. Kaz went to the plant and asked to speak with the site manager, Dennis Kowalski, Polish, like Kaz. 20 years they had known each other. Dennis closed his office door. His eyes stayed on the floor. "My hands are tied. The decision came from New York." No apology. His face said enough. 14 calls. 14 dead ends. 14 people telling Kazimierz Wojciechowski that $126,000 had vanished and nobody could help him. Then came February 12th. Kaz saw Lawrence Whitmore in the parking lot, walking to his rental car, a black Lincoln Continental, briefcase in one hand, portable phone in the other. Kaz approached. Whitmore looked up. No recognition in his eyes. Why would there be? Just another worker. One of 340 faces he never bothered to remember. "Mr. Whitmore," the phone lowered. "Yes?" "My name is Kazimierz Wojciechowski. 31 years at this plant. My father gave it 40. My grandfather started in 1924. A slow nod. "I appreciate your family's service. You took my pension." Whitmore's expression stayed flat. "Mr. Woj..." The name died in his mouth. "These decisions aren't personal. This is just business. The market has spoken." Kaz stared at him. 60 years, 3 generations, and you call it business. Whitmore opened his car door. "I understand you're upset, but there's nothing I can do. The restructuring is final." The door closed. The engine started. The Lincoln pulled away. No backward glance. No second thought. Whitmore had no idea he had just written his own death sentence. That night, the kitchen table again. Helena was there. His 3 sons arrived after dinner. Stefan, Marek, Tomasz. All 3 had received the same packets. All 3 had lost their pensions too. Stefan, 12 years at the plant. Gone. Marek, 6 years. Gone. Tomasz, 2 years. Gone. Silence filled the room. Helena looked at her husband. 33 years of marriage. She knew what he was thinking. She didn't say no. Kaz looked at his sons. "They took everything from us. The law won't help. The union won't help. Nobody will help." A pause. "But I know where Lawrence Whitmore will be on March 7th. Him and his whole team. Final walkthrough before they auction the equipment." Stefan spoke first. "Tell us what you need." Marek spoke second. "I'll handle the planning." Tomasz didn't speak. 19 years old. Still believing the world was fair. Still believing rules meant something. But he didn't leave the table. That was answer enough. Kaz Wojciechowski had been a corporal in the United States Army. He served 2 years in Korea, infantry. He learned 3 things in that war. Know your terrain, control the exits, leave no witnesses. He had never forgotten those lessons. Now he would use them. The planning started the next morning, February 13th, 1982. 22 days until the walkthrough. Marek took the lead on intelligence. He was 24 years old. He had a mind for details. He remembered numbers, schedules, patterns. He started by confirming the date, March 7th, 8:30 p.m. The corporate team would arrive for a final inspection of the equipment before the liquidation auction. This was standard procedure. Executives walked the floor, tagged machinery for sale, assessed scrap value. They would be inside for approximately 2 hours. Marek obtained a copy of the plant layout from the Union Hall. The blueprints were outdated but accurate. Hamtramck Assembly had 4 main entrances: North Loading Dock, South Employee Entrance, East Executive Parking Access, West Emergency Exit. Each entrance had a fire door that could be secured from the inside. Marek walked the plant 3 times that week. He measured distances: North Dock to South Entrance, 412 feet, South Entrance to the main assembly floor, 220 feet, assembly floor to the control room, 89 feet. He noted the blind spots. There were 7 locations on the floor where a man could stand unseen from the main walkway. He wrote everything down in a notebook. Stefan handled access. He was 28 years old, 12 years at the plant. He knew every inch of that building. He knew which doors stuck. He knew which locks were broken. He knew that the security camera system had been disabled in November when Chrysler stopped paying the monitoring company. and he knew about Walter Brozek. Walter was the night security guard, 72 years old. He had worked at the plant since 1939, 43 years. He was supposed to retire in 1980, but his pension had been cut, so he kept working. Walter did his rounds once every 2 hours. He started at the north dock, walked the perimeter, and returned to his station by the south entrance. The full circuit took him 47 minutes. That left 1 hour and 13 minutes between rounds, more than enough time. Stefan also confirmed that Kaz still had his supervisor keys. The locks hadn't been changed. Budget cuts. Kaz could enter through the west emergency exit without triggering any alarm. There was no alarm. That had been disabled too. Tomasz was given one job: watch the parking lot. He spent 4 evenings in his truck across the street from the plant. He documented who came and went, what time they arrived, what time they left, what cars they drove. On February 23rd, he saw something important: a black Lincoln Continental, Connecticut plates, Lawrence Whitmore. Whitmore arrived at 7:15 p.m. with 2 other men. They stayed for 3 hours. They left at 10:20 p.m. Tomasz followed them. They drove to the Pontchartrain Hotel in downtown Detroit, room reservations under Chrysler corporate account. Whitmore was staying in room 614. Tomasz wrote it down. He didn't know why it mattered, but Marek had told him to document everything. So he did. The method was Kaz's decision. He chose the machinery. The assembly line was still operational. Chrysler had kept the equipment maintained for the liquidation sale. The hydraulic presses still functioned. The conveyor system still moved. The welding station still sparked. These machines had built 3 million automobiles. They would serve one final purpose. Kaz tested the main conveyor on February 25th. It started on the first try. The sound of it filled the empty plant, a grinding mechanical roar that echoed off the concrete walls. Kaz stood on the platform and watched the belt move. 31 years he had worked beside these machines. Now they would help him end the men who had stolen everything. But there was a problem. On February 27th, Marek noticed something. A car parked outside the plant, a brown Chevrolet Caprice. It sat there for 2 hours, a man inside watching. Marek wrote down the plate number. He asked a friend at the DMV to run it. The car was registered to the Wayne County Sheriff's Department. Someone was watching the plant, Marek told his father. Kaz considered canceling. Then he made a decision. The police were watching because of the layoffs. They expected vandalism, maybe theft. They didn't expect what was coming, and they wouldn't be watching on March 7th because March 7th was a Sunday. County budget cuts meant no overtime for weekend surveillance. Marek confirmed this with his cousin who worked dispatch. Sundays, the nearest patrol car was stationed 11 miles away in Dearborn. Response time to Hamtramck would be at least 18 minutes. 18 minutes was enough. The escape plan was simple. After it was done, they would leave through the west exit. Kaz's truck would be parked behind the old tool shed. They would drive to Stefan's house in Wyandotte, 15 miles south. They would clean up, they would wait, and they would say nothing. On March 5th, Kaz gathered his sons one final time. He assigned positions. Stefan would secure the south entrance after the executives entered. Marek would man the control room. He would operate the machinery. Tomasz would watch the parking lot. He would signal when all 14 men were inside. Kaz would be on the assembly floor. He would greet them. He would be the last face Lawrence Whitmore ever saw. There was no rehearsal. There was no practice. There was no hesitation. March 7th, 1982, 8:23 p.m. The Wojciechowski family arrived at Hamtramck Assembly Plant. They entered through the west emergency exit. The lock turned without resistance. The door closed behind them, and they waited. 8:23 p.m., March 7th, 1982. The Wojciechowski family stood in the darkness of the Hamtramck Assembly Plant. The machinery was silent. The heat had been off for months. The temperature inside was 21 degrees. Their breath hung in the air like smoke. Kaz checked his watch. The corporate team was scheduled to arrive at 8:30. 7 minutes. He looked at his sons. Stefan stood by the south entrance. He held a length of chain and a padlock. His face showed nothing. Marek was in the control room, 40 feet above the floor. From there, he could operate the main conveyor, the hydraulic presses, and the emergency lighting. He gave his father a single nod. Tomasz was at the window overlooking the east parking lot. His job was simple: watch for headlights, count the men, signal when they were all inside. Kaz stood on the assembly line platform. He held a Remington 12-gauge shotgun. It had belonged to his father. His father had used it to hunt deer in northern Michigan. Tonight it would hunt something else. 8:29 p.m. Tomasz saw headlights. 3 vehicles pulled into the lot: a black Lincoln Continental, 2 gray Chrysler sedans. The doors opened. Men stepped out. Tomasz counted. 14, all wearing suits, all carrying briefcases or clipboards. He recognized Lawrence Whitmore. Whitmore was laughing at something. One of the other men had told a joke. They walked toward the east entrance like they owned the building. They did own it. For 6 more minutes, Tomasz raised his hand. The signal: 14 inside. The executives entered through the east door. Their footsteps echoed on the concrete. Someone found a light switch. The overhead fluorescents flickered on. The assembly line stretched out before them. 400 feet of conveyor belts, welding stations, and hydraulic presses. Whitmore walked in front. He was pointing at machinery, dictating notes to a younger man with a clipboard. Tag the presses for auction. The conveyor system goes to the Massacre plant. Scrap the rest. The men spread out across the floor. Some examined equipment. Some took photographs. Some stood in small groups, talking about dinner reservations. None of them noticed the shadow moving behind them. Stefan waited until all 14 were past the south entrance. Then he stepped out of the darkness. He wrapped the chain through the door handles. The padlock clicked shut. One of the executives heard the sound. He turned. "Hey, what are you—" The lights went out. Every fluorescent tube died at once. Marek had cut the main power from the control room. Total darkness. Someone screamed. Then the emergency lights kicked on. Red, dim. Just enough to see shapes. Just enough to see the man standing on the assembly line platform, Kazimierz Wojciechowski, holding a shotgun. "Good evening, gentlemen." His voice echoed across the plant floor. Whitmore squinted into the red light. "Who the hell are you?" "My name is Kazimierz Wojciechowski. I worked here for 31 years. My father worked here for 40. My grandfather started in 1924. He paused. "You took my pension. You took my son's pensions. You took everything." Whitmore's face changed. He remembered now. The parking lot. The man who couldn't pronounce his own name. "Listen," Whitmore said. "Whatever you're thinking." "I'm not thinking anything. I'm done thinking. The time for thinking was when you decided to steal from 340 families." One of the executives moved toward the south exit. He grabbed the door handle. Chains rattled. Locked. He ran to the east entrance. Also chained. The north loading dock. Same. 14 men. 4 exits. All sealed. "You can't do this," Whitmore said. "There are laws. There are no laws for men like you. I tried the law. I tried the union. I tried everything. Nobody helped, so now I help myself." Kaz raised the shotgun. Marek. The conveyor belt roared to life. The sound was deafening. A mechanical scream that filled the entire plant. The executives panicked. They scattered in different directions. Some ran for the exits again. Some hid behind machinery. Some froze where they stood. The first to fall was a man named David Stern. He was the company's general counsel. He had written the contract language that reclassified the pensions. He had made it legal to steal $126,000 from Kazimierz Wojciechowski. He ran toward the west exit. He didn't see Stefan waiting in the shadows. Stefan stepped out and swung a 3-foot length of steel pipe. It connected with Stern's knee. The sound was like a branch breaking. Stern collapsed. He tried to crawl. Stefan hit him twice more. Stern stopped moving. The second was a human resources director named Philip Graves. He had personally approved the pension reclassification memos. He had signed his name to 340 letters telling workers their retirement was gone. He tried to climb the stairs to the control room. He made it halfway. Marek was waiting at the top. Marek didn't use a weapon. He simply pushed. Graves tumbled backward down the metal stairs. His head struck the concrete at the bottom. He did not get up. The third was a consultant from New York named Alan Brooks. He had never met a single Hamtramck worker. He had never seen the plant before tonight. He was 29 years old. He had been hired to write a report on workforce transition optimization. He had a wife and a 2-year-old daughter at home. He hid behind a hydraulic press. He thought he was safe. He didn't know that Marek could operate that press from the control room. The machine activated, 40 tons of force. Alan Brooks had time to scream, not long enough to pray. The fourth was the youngest member of the team, a junior accountant named Michael Torres, 26 years old. He had been with Chrysler for 8 months. He had nothing to do with the pension decision. He was just there to take notes. He ran toward Tomasz. He didn't know Tomasz was part of it. "Please," he said. "Please, you have to help me. There's a man with a gun. Please." Tomasz looked at him. Michael Torres had brown eyes. He was shaking. "I have a kid," Torres said. "A little girl. She's 3. Please. I didn't do anything. I just started this job." Tomasz felt his stomach turn. This wasn't what he expected. He expected monsters. Men in suits who laughed while they destroyed families. He didn't expect someone his own age. Someone with a daughter. Someone begging. "Tomasz," his father's voice, cold, flat. "Do what needs to be done." Tomasz looked at his father. Then he looked at Michael Torres. His hands were shaking. He raised the pistol his father had given him. Torres started to cry. "Please, please don't. I'll give you anything. I'll tell them whatever you want. Please." Tomasz pulled the trigger. The shot echoed across the plant. Torres fell. Tomasz turned away and vomited on the concrete floor. His whole body was trembling. Marek's voice came over the intercom. 4 down, 10 remaining. They're grouping near the north dock." Kaz racked another shell into the shotgun. "Then that's where we go." He looked at Tomasz. "You stay here. Watch the exits. Signal if anyone gets through." Tomasz nodded. He couldn't speak. He couldn't look at the body on the floor. Kaz and Stefan moved toward the north dock. The red emergency lights cast long shadows across the machinery. Somewhere in the darkness, 10 men were waiting, praying, hoping someone would save them. But the nearest police car was 11 miles away, and nobody was coming. 8:51 p.m., 4 bodies on the floor, 10 men still alive. They had gathered near the north loading dock. They thought there might be a way out, a gap in the chain, a window they could break. They were wrong. Kaz and Stefan approached from the west side. The red emergency lights made everything look like a fever dream. Shadows moved on the walls. The conveyor belt was still running. The mechanical roar drowned out the sound of footsteps. The executives didn't hear them coming. The first 3 died quickly. They were standing in a cluster near the loading bay door. 2 accountants and a logistics coordinator. Kaz didn't know their names. He didn't need to. He stepped around the corner and fired twice. The first shot hit the man on the left. He dropped without a sound. The second shot hit the man in the middle. He spun and fell against the loading door. The third man tried to run. Stefan caught him before he made it 10 feet. The pipe rose and fell. Once, twice. The man stopped moving. 7 left. Marek's voice came over the intercom. 2 heading for the roof access, northwest stairwell. Kaz looked at Stefan. "Go." Stefan moved without a word. He knew that stairwell. He had climbed it 1,000 times during his 12 years at the plant. There was only one way up and only one way down. 6 miles away, Martha Brozek was worried. Her husband Walter had worked the night shift at Hamtramck Assembly for 11 years. Every night he called her at 9 o'clock. Every night for 11 years. Tonight, he hadn't called. She tried the plant's main number. No answer. She tried Walter's direct line at the security station. No answer. She waited 10 minutes. She tried again. Still, nothing. At 9:07 p.m., Martha Brozek called the Wayne County Sheriff's non-emergency line. The dispatcher was a woman named Gloria Higgins. Gloria had worked dispatch for 14 years. She had heard every kind of call. Missing husbands were not unusual. "Ma'am, has your husband been drinking?" "Walter doesn't drink. He hasn't missed a call in 11 years. Something is wrong." Gloria made a note. Hamtramck Assembly Plant. Security guard not responding. Low priority. She would send someone to check. Eventually. The nearest patrol car was in Dearborn. 11 miles away, Deputy Frank Kowalczyk was eating a sandwich in his cruiser. His radio crackled. "Frank, we got a welfare check. Hamtramck Assembly. Security guard's wife says he's not answering." Frank looked at his sandwich. "That place is closed, isn't it?" "Mostly. Still got a night watchman." "I'll head over when I finish my dinner." "No rush. Probably fell asleep." Frank took another bite. The clock on his dashboard read 9:11 p.m. Inside the plant, Stefan reached the northwest stairwell. He could hear footsteps above him. 2 men, climbing fast. They thought the roof was an escape. They were wrong. The roof access door had been welded shut in 1979. Fire code violation. Nobody ever fixed it. Budget cuts. Stefan climbed slowly. He was in no hurry. He reached the top floor. The 2 men were at the roof door. One was pulling at the handle. The other was looking for something to break the lock. They heard Stefan's footsteps and turned. The first man was Robert Chen, senior financial analyst. He had helped design the pension reclassification formula. He had calculated exactly how much money Chrysler would save, $47 million. That number had earned him a promotion. The second man was James Wheeler, Deputy General Counsel. He had reviewed the contract language. He had signed off on the legality. He had written a memo calling the pension theft an elegant solution to legacy cost obligations. Robert Chen raised his hands. "Wait, just wait. We can talk about this." "No," Stefan said. "We can't." He swung the pipe. Chen fell against the wall. Wheeler tried to push past Stefan. He almost made it. Stefan caught his arm and twisted. Something snapped. Wheeler screamed. Stefan silenced him with a second swing. 2 more bodies on the top floor. 5 left. Back on the assembly floor, Kaz was hunting. The remaining executives had scattered into the machinery. They were hiding behind presses, crouching under conveyor assemblies, praying in the darkness. Kaz moved slowly. He knew this floor better than anyone alive. He had walked it for 31 years. Every shadow was familiar. Every hiding spot was known. He found the next one behind a tool cabinet. A man named Warren Ellis, Vice President of Human Resources. He had personally approved the pension reclassification policy. He had presented it to the board as a creative approach to liability management. Ellis was crying, tears running down his face. "Please, I have a family. I have 3 kids." Kaz looked at him. "I have 3 sons. They all worked here. They all lost their pensions. Because of you. I didn't make the decision. I just implemented it. I was following orders." Kaz's expression didn't change. "So were the guards at Auschwitz." The shotgun spoke. 4 left. Merrick's voice came over the intercom. "One trying to break the east window, ground floor." Kaz moved. The man at the east window was using a fire extinguisher. He was slamming it against the glass. The glass was reinforced. It cracked but didn't break. He swung again and again. The glass shattered. Cold air rushed in. The man started to climb through. He was halfway out when Kaz reached him. Kaz grabbed his leg and pulled. The man screamed as the broken glass tore through his suit, through his skin. Kaz pulled him back inside. The man was bleeding from a dozen cuts. He tried to crawl away. He left a red trail on the concrete. He didn't get far. 3 left, 9:23 p.m. Deputy Frank Kowalczyk finished his sandwich. He started his cruiser and pulled onto Michigan Avenue, 11 miles to Hamtramck. He drove the speed limit. There was no reason to hurry. Just a welfare check. Probably nothing. Inside the plant, the last 3 executives had found each other. They were hiding in the foreman's office, a small room with a metal door. They had barricaded it with a desk. They thought they were safe. Lawrence Whitmore was one of them. The other 2 were his assistant, a a young woman named Patricia Vance, and the company's chief accountant, Harold Mumford. Patricia was 24 years old. This was her first corporate assignment. She had been with the company for 6 months. She was crying. Harold Mumford was 53. He had worked for Chrysler for 25 years. He had processed the paperwork that made the pension theft official. He had known it was wrong. He had done it anyway. Now he was sitting on the floor, shaking. Whitmore was pacing. He was trying to think. "Someone will come," he said. "The police. Someone will notice we're missing." Patricia looked at her watch. "We were supposed to check in with the hotel at 10. Whitmore nodded. 20 minutes. We just have to survive 20 minutes. Harold Mumford shook his head. "They're going to kill us. All of us. You heard what he said. He said no witnesses." Whitmore turned on him. "Shut up. Just shut up. We're going to get through this." But he didn't believe it. Not really. He could hear footsteps outside the door. Someone was coming. 9:31 p.m. Deputy Frank Kowalczyk was still 4 miles away. He was driving slowly because the roads were icy. March in Michigan. Winter never ended when you expected it to. His radio crackled again. "Frank, you still en route to Hamtramck?" "About 4 miles out." "We got another call. Someone driving past said they heard what sounded like gunshots." Frank sat up straighter. "Gunshots? Could be nothing. Lot of abandoned buildings in that area. Kids with fireworks, maybe." Frank turned on his lights. He pressed the accelerator. "I'm speeding up. ETA 6 minutes." "Copy that. Want me to dispatch backup?" "Not yet. Let me see what we've got first." He didn't want a call for backup over fireworks. He'd look like an idiot. 6 minutes. Kaz reached the foreman's office. He could see the desk pushed against the door. He could hear voices inside, crying, arguing, praying. He didn't try to force the door. Instead, he walked to the control room stairs. Marek was waiting. "They're in the foreman's office." Marek nodded. "I know. The ventilation system connects to that room." Kaz understood. In 1977, there had been a chemical spill in the foreman's office. The company had installed a direct ventilation line to clear the fumes. That line was still there. Marek had already found it. "I can pump exhaust fumes from the paint shop through that vent. It'll take about 4 minutes. Kaz shook his head. "No, I want Whitmore to see my face." He looked at his son. "Open that door." Marek smiled. "I can do that too." He walked to the control panel. The foreman's office had an electronic lock, a security feature installed in 1980. The lock was controlled from the main system. Marek typed a command. The desk was still blocking the door, but the door opened outward. One push and it swung wide open. The desk meant nothing. Kaz walked down the stairs. Stefan joined him at the bottom. Tomasz was still by the east entrance. He hadn't moved since Michael Torres. He couldn't move. He just stood there, staring at nothing. Kaz didn't have time to worry about his youngest son. He had one more job to do. He walked to the foreman's office. He pushed the door. It swung open. 3 faces stared at him. Patricia Vance, Harold Mumford, Lawrence Whitmore. Patricia screamed. Harold started begging. Whitmore just stared. He knew this was the end. "Get up," Kaz said. Nobody moved. "Get up." Stefan stepped forward and grabbed Harold Mumford by the collar. He dragged him out of the office. Harold was crying. "Please, please, I have grandchildren. I didn't want to do it. They made me." Stefan looked at his father. Kaz nodded. Stefan's pipe rose. Harold Mumford fell. 2 left. Patricia Vance was next. She was curled in the corner. Her whole body was shaking. "Please," she whispered. "I just started. I didn't know about any of this. I just schedule meetings. I just get coffee. Please." Kaz looked at her. She was 24 years old, the same age as Marek. She had nothing to do with the pension theft. She was in the wrong place, at the wrong time, working for the wrong people. Kaz hesitated. For the first time all night, he hesitated. Stefan watched his father, waiting. Patricia looked up. Hope flickered in her eyes. Then Kaz remembered something. Something his father had told him 50 years ago. In war, there are no innocent bystanders, only survivors and casualties. The shotgun rose. "I'm sorry," Kaz said. He meant it. Patricia Vance closed her eyes. She didn't scream. One left. 9:37 p.m. Deputy Frank Kowalczyk turned onto Joseph Campow Avenue. He could see the Hamtramck Assembly Plant ahead. Dark, quiet, no sign of trouble. Then he saw the cars in the parking lot. 3 vehicles, a black Lincoln Continental, 2 gray Chrysler sedans. That didn't match a closed plant. He pulled into the lot and killed his engine. He stepped out of the cruiser. The air was cold, 21 degrees. He could see his breath. He walked toward the east entrance. The door was chained from the inside. He walked to the south entrance. Same. He walked to the north loading dock. Chains. Every door was locked. Frank Kowalczyk reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Kowalczyk. I'm at Hamtramck Assembly. Something's wrong. All entrances are chained from inside. I've got 3 vehicles in the lot. I need backup. Now." Gloria Higgins responded immediately. "Copy that. Dispatching all available units. ETA on closest backup is 9 minutes. 9 minutes. Frank looked at the building. Whatever was happening inside, it had been happening for almost an hour. 9 more minutes wouldn't change anything. He was too late. He just didn't know it yet. 9:38 p.m. Lawrence Whitmore stood alone in the foreman's office. 13 bodies lay scattered across the plant. He was the last one. Kaz stepped into the doorway. The shotgun hung at his side. He didn't raise it, not yet. Whitmore backed against the wall. His expensive suit was soaked with sweat. His hands were shaking. His face was the color of ash. "You don't have to do this," Whitmore said. Kaz didn't respond. "I can get you money, real money. I have access to accounts, offshore, untraceable. I can make you rich." Kaz stepped closer. "I was never trying to get rich. I was trying to retire, after 31 years. That's all I wanted." Whitmore's voice cracked. "Then let me fix it. I'll make calls. I'll get your pension reinstated. All of you. Your sons, too. I have the authority. I can do it tonight." Kaz stopped walking. He was 6 feet away from Lawrence Whitmore, close enough to see the vein pulsing in his neck, close enough to smell his fear. "You had the authority to steal from 340 families, but you didn't have the authority to help a single one of us when we asked." "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know how bad it was. They just gave me numbers, spreadsheets. I didn't think about the people." "I know," Kaz said. "That's the problem." He raised the shotgun. Whitmore fell to his knees. "Please, I have a wife. I have 2 daughters. They're 14 and 11. They need their father. Please." Kaz looked at him. "I have 3 sons. They needed their futures. You took that. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, I'll do anything." Kaz's finger rested on the trigger. "Do you remember what you said to me? In the parking lot? February 12th? Whitmore shook his head. Tears were streaming down his face. "You said these decisions aren't personal. You said it's just business." Whitmore sobbed. I remember. I was wrong. I was so wrong. You said the market has spoken." Whitmore looked up. His eyes were red. His whole body was trembling. "Please, don't." Kaz leaned closer. "The market has spoken, Mr. Whitmore." The shotgun roared. Lawrence Whitmore fell backward against the wall. He slid to the floor. He did not move again. 14. It was done. Outside, Deputy Frank Kowalczyk heard the shot. He drew his service weapon. He ran to the east entrance. Chains. He ran to the south entrance. Chains. He grabbed his radio. "Shots fired. Shots fired inside the plant. Where's my backup?" 7 minutes out, Frank. Hold your position." "I can't hold my position. Someone's dying in there." He looked around. There had to be another way in. Then he saw it. The broken window on the east side. Glass scattered on the ground. Blood on the frame. Frank climbed through. His uniform tore on the jagged edge. He didn't care. He dropped onto the plant floor. The emergency lights were still on. Red. Dim. He could hear the conveyor belt running somewhere in the darkness. He moved forward, gun raised, heart pounding. He saw the first body 10 feet inside, then the second, then the third. Jesus Christ, he whispered. He kept moving. He had to find someone alive, anyone. Kaz walked out of the foreman's office. Stefan was waiting. "It's done," Stefan nodded. "Cops are outside. I heard the radio." Kaz looked toward the west exit, their escape route. "Where's Tomasz?" Stefan pointed. Tomasz was still standing by the east entrance. He hadn't moved in 47 minutes. He was staring at the body of Michael Torres, the 26-year-old accountant, the one with a 3-year-old daughter. Kaz walked to his youngest son. "Tomasz, we have to go." Tomasz didn't respond. His eyes were empty. His hands were still shaking. "Tomasz." Nothing. Kaz grabbed his son's shoulder. "Look at me." Tomasz turned slowly. He looked at his father like he didn't recognize him. "We're leaving. Now." Stefan's truck is behind the tool shed. We go out the west exit. We drive to Wyandotte. We say nothing. Do you understand? Tomasz blinked. He had a daughter. "I know. She's 3 years old. I know. I killed him." Kaz gripped his son's shoulders. "You did what had to be done. For this family. For everything they took from us. Now we go. And we don't look back." Tomasz started to cry, silent tears running down his face. But he moved. He followed his father toward the west exit. Marek came down from the control room. He had wiped the control panel clean. No fingerprints. The 4 of them walked through the plant, past the machinery, past the bodies, past 31 years of memories. They reached the west exit. Kaz put his hand on the door. He paused. He turned and looked at the assembly floor one last time. 3 generations of Wojciechowski men had worked this line. His grandfather, his father, himself, his sons. 58 years, 3 million automobiles, and now 14 bodies. He pushed the door open. Cold air rushed in. The night was quiet. No sirens yet. They had maybe 3 minutes. Stefan's truck was behind the tool shed, right where they left it. They climbed in. Stefan drove. Kaz sat in the passenger seat. Marek and Tomasz were in the back. Nobody spoke. Stefan pulled onto the service road behind the plant. He drove without headlights for the first quarter mile. Then he turned onto Conant Street. Headlights on. Normal speed. Just another truck on a Sunday night. 9:44 p.m. Deputy Frank Kowalczyk found the 14th body, Lawrence Whitmore, still warm. He checked for a pulse. Nothing. He stood up. His hands were covered in blood. He looked around the foreman's office. 13 more bodies somewhere in this building. 14 total. And whoever did this was gone. He walked back to the broken window. He climbed out. 3 patrol cars were pulling into the lot. Sirens wailing. Lights flashing. Too late. 9 minutes too late. Frank Kowalczyk stood in the parking lot. The cold air burned his lungs. He looked at the plant. A cathedral of steel and concrete. A tomb now. His sergeant approached. "What do we got?" Frank shook his head. 14 bodies. All suits. All dead. Whoever did this is gone. Any witnesses? None alive. The sergeant looked at the building. Who the hell would do something like this? Frank didn't answer, but he had a feeling. The pension theft had been all over the news. 340 workers. 340 motives. This was going to be the biggest case in Wayne County history. And somewhere out there, the killers were driving home. 9:51 p.m. Stefan's truck pulled into his driveway in Wyandotte, 15 miles from Hamtramck. The house was dark. His wife had taken the kids to her mother's for the weekend. Kaz had told her to. They went inside. They cleaned up. They burned their clothes in the backyard. They buried the weapons in Stefan's garage. At 10:15 p.m., they sat in the kitchen. 4 men, 4 cups of coffee, nobody drinking. Kaz looked at his sons. "We don't speak of this. Not to anyone. Not to your mother. Not to your wives. Not to your children. Not ever." Stefan nodded. Marek nodded. Tomasz stared at the table. "If anyone asks, we were here all night, playing cards, drinking beer. We never went to that plant." Kaz stood up. "Go home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we act normal. We go to church. We eat dinner with our families. We wait." He walked to the door. He stopped. He turned back to his sons. "What we did tonight, some people will call it murder. Maybe it was. But those men stole our lives. They stole our futures. They stole everything we worked for. And nobody was going to stop them." He paused. "I don't know if God will forgive us. I don't know if we deserve forgiveness. But I know one thing. I would do it again. Every single one of them. I would do it again." He opened the door. "Good night, boys." He walked into the darkness. The door closed behind him. Marek went home 10 minutes later. Stefan went to bed. Tomasz sat at the kitchen table until sunrise. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Michael Torres. Brown eyes, shaking, begging. "I have a kid, a little girl. She's 3. Tomasz would hear those words for the rest of his life. By midnight, Hamtramck Assembly Plant was surrounded. 47 police officers, 12 FBI agents, 6 ambulances that had nothing to do. The coroner worked until 4 in the morning. 14 body bags, 14 death certificates, 14 families who would get phone calls before sunrise. The investigation started immediately. Detective Harold Morrison of the Wayne County Sheriff's Department was assigned as lead investigator. He had been a detective for 18 years. He had never seen anything like this. 14 victims, all executives, all from the same company, all involved in the same pension restructuring. The motive was obvious. The suspect pool was not. 340 workers had lost their pensions. 340 people with reason to want these men dead. Morrison started with the most vocal. He pulled records from the Labor Relations Board. He found 6 formal complaints filed against Chrysler's pension reclassification. One name appeared on 4 of those complaints. Kazimierz Wojciechowski. Morrison pulled Wojciechowski's file. 51 years old, 31 years at the plant, Korean War veteran, infantry, trained in combat, 3 sons, all employed at Hamtramck Assembly. All 4 had lost their pensions. Morrison found something else, a court transcript from a bankruptcy hearing in December. Wojciechowski had confronted Lawrence Whitmore directly. He had to be removed by security. The transcript recorded his exact words. "You stole my life. You stole my son's futures. This isn't over." Morrison had his suspect. March 9, 1982, 7:15 a.m. 6 squad cars pulled onto Pulaski Street in Hamtramck. They stopped in front of a small brick house with a chain-link fence. Kaz Wojciechowski was sitting on the front porch. He was drinking coffee. He watched the cars arrive. He didn't move. Detective Morrison stepped out of the lead vehicle. He walked to the fence. "Mr. Wojciechowski." Kaz took a sip of coffee. "I've been expecting you. I need you to come with me." Kaz set down his cup. He stood slowly. His knees ached. 31 years on concrete floors. "Can I say goodbye to my wife?" Morrison nodded. Kaz walked inside. Helena was standing in the kitchen. She already knew. She had known since Sunday night. Kaz held her for a long time. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. Then he walked back outside. He put his hands behind his back. Morrison cuffed him. "You have the right to remain silent." Kaz didn't need to be told. He had nothing left to say. By noon, all 4 Wojciechowski men were in custody. Stefan was arrested at his home in Wyandotte. His wife was screaming. His children were crying. He didn't resist. Marek was arrested at his apartment in Hamtramck. He was eating breakfast. He put down his fork and stood up. Tomasz was arrested at his parents' house. He was still sitting at the kitchen table. He hadn't moved since Sunday night. When the officers came through the door, he looked up. "I killed a man with a daughter," he said. The officers looked at each other. "She's 3 years old." They put him in handcuffs. He didn't resist. The trial began on March 14, 1983, 1 year and 1 week after the massacre. It was the most publicized trial in Michigan history. Every seat in the courtroom was filled. Reporters from New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, camera crews from 3 networks. The prosecution presented their case for 4 weeks. Ballistic evidence, boot prints matching Stefan's work boots, a notebook found in Marak's apartment with plant blueprints and schedules, testimony from Deputy Frank Kowalczyk about what he found inside. The defense argued temporary insanity, extreme emotional disturbance caused by systematic economic abuse. They called expert witnesses who testified about the psychological effects of pension theft. They called former Hamtramck workers who described the devastation. They called a psychiatrist who said Kaz was suffering from acute stress disorder. The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for 3 days, guilty on all counts, 14 counts of first-degree murder, each. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Kazimierz Wojciechowski, life without parole. Stefan Wojciechowski, life without parole. Marek Wojciechowski, life without parole. Tomasz Wojciechowski, life with possibility of parole after 20 years. The judge cited his age and limited participation. Tomasz was 19 years old. He would be eligible for release at 39 if he survived that long. The years passed. Kaz served his sentence at Jackson State Prison. He never complained, he never appealed, he never spoke to reporters. Helena visited every Sunday for 12 years. She drove 90 miles each way. She never missed a visit. In 1994, Helena collapsed at home. Heart attack. She died before the ambulance arrived. She was 60 years old. A prison guard told Kaz the next morning. He listened. He nodded. He went back to his cell. He never spoke again. Not to guards. Not to other inmates. Not to the chaplain who visited every week. 11 years of silence. Kaz Wojciechowski died on September 3, 2005. Heart failure. He was 74 years old. He had served 23 years. The chaplain was with him at the end. Kaz spoke his final words that morning, the first words in 11 years. "Tell my boys I did what I had to do." Then he closed his eyes. He didn't open them again. Stefan is still alive. As of this recording, he is 70 years old. He has been in prison for 42 years. Model prisoner. He teaches welding to other inmates. The same skill his father taught him. The same skill his grandfather learned in 1924. His wife divorced him in 1985. His children never visited, not once in 42 years. He says he doesn't blame them. Marek died in 1997, lung cancer. He was 39 years old. He had served 15 years. In his final months, he wrote letters to his mother, dozens of them. He never sent them. They found the letters in his cell after he died. The prison forwarded them to Stefan. Stefan has never opened them. Tomasz was paroled in 2001. He had served 19 years. He was 38 years old. He returned to Hamtramck. Nobody would hire him. The name Wojciechowski was still remembered. He found work at a car wash in Dearborn. $8 an hour. No benefits. No pension. He lives alone in a studio apartment. He never married. He never had children. In 2004, a documentary filmmaker interviewed him. The interview lasted 3 hours. Most of it was silence, but Tomasz said one thing that mattered. "I think about Michael Torres every day, every single day. I see his face when I close my eyes. I hear his voice." He said he had a daughter. She was 3 years old. She'd be 25 now. She grew up without a father, because of me. He paused. "I don't know if what we did was right. I don't know if it was wrong. I just know I can't undo it, and I have to live with that, every day, for the rest of my life." The filmmaker asked if he had any regrets. Tomasz looked at the camera. "I regret that it had to happen. I regret that nobody gave us another choice. I regret that 14 men died, and I regret that one of them was just a kid like me, doing his job, trying to feed his family." He looked away. "But do I regret standing with my father, with my brothers?" He shook his head. "No, I don't regret that. They're my family, and family is all we ever had." Lawrence Whitmore's widow filed a civil lawsuit against the Wojciechowski family. She won $4.2 million in damages. She never collected a cent. The family had nothing. The house on Pulaski Street was worth $38,000. That was all. Whitmore's son, Lawrence Jr., was 16 when his father died. He went to law school. He became a labor attorney. He spent his career representing workers in pension disputes. In 2012, he gave an interview. "I wanted to understand what drove someone to do what they did. I spent 20 years trying to understand, and I think I finally do. My father wasn't a monster, but he was part of a system that destroyed people, and when you destroy enough people, eventually one of them destroys you back." He paused. "I'm not saying it was justified. I'm saying it was inevitable." Hamtramck Assembly Plant was demolished in 1988. The machinery was sold at auction. The building was torn down. The land sat empty for 22 years. Weeds grew through the concrete. Graffiti covered the remaining walls. Someone spray-painted a message that stayed for years. The market has spoken. In 2010, Chrysler built a new plant on the same ground. They called it Detroit Hamtramck Assembly. State-of-the-art, robotics and electric vehicles, the future of American manufacturing. There is no plaque, no memorial, no marker, nothing to indicate what happened there. But the older workers know. They tell the new hires, late at night, on the assembly line. They tell them about Kazimierz Wojciechowski and his 3 sons. They tell them about 31 years and $126,000. They tell them about 14 men in suits who came to shut down a plant. And they tell them the lesson, the same lesson that gets passed down every generation. Don't ever think they care about you. Don't ever think the rules protect you. Don't ever think they won't take everything if they can, because they will, and when they do, nobody's coming to help. Was Kazimierz Wojciechowski a murderer? Yes. Was he a monster? That depends on who you ask. The law said guilty. The jury said guilty. 14 families said guilty. But the workers of Hamtramck said something else. They said he was one of them, a man who worked hard, a man who followed the rules, a man who got crushed anyway, and when there was nothing left to lose, he fought back. The only way he had left. Was he right? No. 14 people are dead. Some of them deserved it. Some of them didn't. Patricia Vance was 24. Michael Torres was 26. They had nothing to do with the pension theft. They died anyway. Because when violence starts, it doesn't check credentials. It doesn't ask who's guilty. It just consumes. Was he wrong? Yes. But he was also a man who ran out of options. And when the system fails you, when the law fails you, when everyone you ask for help says there's nothing they can do, what's left? I don't have the answer. Neither did Kaz Wojciechowski. He just had a shotgun and 31 years of broken promises. Some of you will condemn him. You should. Some of you will understand him. You should do that too. And some of you, the honest ones, will admit the truth. If it happened to you, if they took everything you worked for, if nobody would help, you don't know what you'd do. Nobody does. Until they're sitting at that kitchen table, looking at their sons, with nothing left to lose. If you made it this far, you've heard the whole story, not the comfortable version, not the version that lets you sleep easy, the real one. What would you have done? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about ordinary people pushed past their limits, subscribe to this channel, because the Wojciechowski family wasn't the first, and they won't be the last.